A week remains until the election, and a television journalist accuses the incumbent mayor Boris Litvin of corruption. In 5 years, the mayor has not allocated money from the budget for road construction, but he has bought himself an expensive SUV. An elderly couple came to the store. At that moment the cashier was watching the interview and commenting on it aloud, calling the mayor a scoundrel. The cashier had no idea that standing before her were the parents of Boris Litvin. Meanwhile, Boris arrived in his expensive car at the local clinic to record a campaign video. His parents were also supposed to participate. The chief doctor thanked the mayor on camera for allocating money to renovate the hospital. In reality there was almost no renovation. The money was embezzled by the mayor and the chief doctor. Incidentally, before retiring, Boris's mother worked as the head of the cardiology department at this hospital. Veronika Nikolaevna had to speak words of praise to her son on camera, even though it was false. Boris has a lot to do, but after the interview his parents insisted on giving him a ride. Of course their car is much more modest. The mother handed her son a thermos of berry juice. Boris has long lost warm, trusting relationships with his parents because he is busy with his own life. Boris doesn't remember how he fell asleep. He woke up locked in his room at the parents' country house. Bars were installed on the window, as well as on the door. Not understanding anything, Boris demanded an explanation from his parents. When Boris began to behave aggressively and overturned the food tray, the father used a stun gun. Boris lost consciousness. Veronika reminded her husband that they had agreed to resort to violence only as a last resort. Making sure their son was okay, the parents locked him up again. Boris shouted at them to let him go, but they were relentless. When Michael, the mayor's secretary, called, Valentin lied that they had dropped Boris off at the city hall and hadn't seen him since. Veronika believes that her husband is to blame for their poor upbringing of Thea's son because Valentin has always been very soft-natured. Boris grew up spoiled, and now the parents intended to re-educate him, even though the son was already 38 years old. Boris admitted that he was a bad son and promised the parents that after the elections, he would visit them more often with his wife and son. Valentin told Boris that the elections would take place without him. The parents were ashamed to look people in the eye and constantly hear about the corrupt mayor. Since the authorities could not or would not stop it, the couple decided to take matters into their own hands. Their son threatened to put them in a psychiatric clinic, but it had no effect. As punishment, the parents decided to leave Boris without food. This would be a good lesson for him. Boris did not stop trying to escape. The mother and father did not understand why he was so disrespectful to his own family. Boris tried to squeeze through the bars and got stuck. The parents called him a fool. Michael went to the police, fearing that Boris's numerous enemies had kidnapped him. The investigator doubted it was a kidnapping, but Michael insisted on an investigation. Veronika began accusing the son of ingratitude while her husband searched the garage for the necessary tools. Veronika considered the son a disgrace to the family because he thought of nothing but his own enrichment. Boris justified himself by saying that all officials steal. It's not him, it's the system. However, the parents did not want to hear any excuses. For the first time in her life, Veronika whipped her son. The parents locked him up again, making it clear that he would not get out until he became an honest man. Boris called them psychopaths. The mother in turn ordered Boris to clean his room, or he would not get any food. The surveillance camera showed that Boris's parents did not turn towards City Hall, but in the opposite direction. Svetlana, Boris's wife, was sure that he was off somewhere having fun with his mistress. No one knew that Boris was actually imprisoned in his parents' country house. The father woke him up early by loudly playing children's songs on a tape recorder. Boris shouted to his parents that he would not save them from prison. He tried to call for help, but no one would hear him here. Initially it was Veronika's idea, but in case they got caught, Valentin intended to take the blame. The police arrived at their place. The couple played dumb. Boris desperately screamed and rattled the window, but the tape recorder drowned out all other sounds. The officer explained to the couple that they were the last ones to see the mayor. Veronika kept insisting that they had dropped him off near City Hall and had no idea where he might be now. When asked about Boris's relationship with his wife Svetlana, the couple replied that they didn't know for sure. Their son rarely communicated with them. Before leaving, the officer promised to keep the couple informed. It would be better if no one knew about the incumbent mayor's disappearance on the eve of the elections. The couple didn't seem worried at all, which couldn't help but surprise the officer. It seemed they got away with it this time. Meanwhile, Boris was almost driven mad by the songs. Finally, the father turned off the tape recorder. The mother handed Boris winter clothes, saying that they would soon go for a walk. In the bright down jacket and scarf, Boris felt extremely foolish. He wouldn't be able to run away even if he wanted to because of the chain. Taking advantage of the situation, Boris began loudly calling for help, but there was no one nearby. Boris threatened that he wouldn't budge, But until now he didn't know that his father had a remote control that tightened the chain. From now on, Boris had to shovel snow, help his father in the garage and do other household chores. Boris dreamed of escaping, but it was impossible. Occupational therapy was supposed to re-educate him. When Boris took the parents' dog hostage, Veronica used the stun gun. Everyone was very worried about the sudden disappearance of the mayor. He hadn't booked tickets on trains or planes, and he wasn't in hospitals or morgues. At the same time, Boris Litvin couldn't be officially declared missing. If he was removed from the elections, everyone involved in the corruption alongside him would get what they deserved. Today is Boris's birthday. And it's his worst birthday ever. Michael visited Svetlana, who was already drunk. She didn't care about her husband's disappearance. Her main concern was that his property wouldn't be confiscated. Michael needed access to Boris's safe, which contained dirt worth at least 20 years in prison. Maybe Boris had simply run away with all the documents. The problem was that Svetlana didn't know the code. The parents threw a birthday party for Boris. Of course he was still confined. Veronica and Valentin began recalling their son's misdeeds from childhood. Michael called a locksmith to break into the safe. All the documents were in place. Svetlana was shocked to learn that all her husband's property was registered to his parents. This meant that in the event of a divorce, she would be left with nothing. New Year's was approaching, and the family decorated the Christmas tree. Veronica took a picture as a memento. The parents continued treating Boris like a small child. Veronica even read him fairy tales. Boris had already resigned himself to his fate. When asked why he started stealing and what he lacked in life, Boris replied that he always lacked everything. Their family lived modestly and constantly had to save money. There were only a few days left until the elections, and the mayor had not appeared in public. Svetlana came to her husband's parents' house. Boris didn't want his family to live in poverty like his parents once did. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Svetlana stood on the doorstep. Veronica made it clear to the daughter-in-law that she was not welcome here. They understood well that her sudden desire to improve relations with the relatives was purely for selfish reasons. Currently Daniil, the son of Svetlana and Boris, was studying in London. He never called his grandparents. Daniil was worried about the father's disappearance because next year's tuition hadn't been paid yet. Only today did Valentin and Veronica find out that all their son's property, including 3 apartments in Moscow and a huge house in Crimea, was registered in their names. Svetlana hoped that her father-in-law and mother-in-law would refuse the property and gift it to their grandson. Of course she did not achieve what she wanted. Later, the couple demanded explanations from their son. From the state's point of view, they appeared to be wealthy. Before bed, Veronica asked her husband how they could have raised such a terrible person. After all, they always lived honestly and never envied anyone. Maybe they should have been stricter with their son. The next day, Valentin decided to consult a family psychologist online. Veronica was surprised but joined her husband. The couple said their son was prone to lying and stealing. Thinking they were talking about a teenager, the psychologist advised them to be more patient and praise their son more often. Veronica found these tips to be nonsense, and besides, the psychologist was a young woman without children. Boris's occupational therapy continued. He often called for help, but there was only the forest around. Boris had to obey his parents unquestioningly. When he was left alone, he always tried to break the bars. Out of boredom, Boris started assembling a construction set, just like in his childhood. Mother and son even played a board game, like in the good old days. Hearing praise from his mother, Boris was surprised. She had never praised him before. For the first time they had an open conversation. At one point, following the psychologist's advice, Veronica wanted to tell her son how much she loved him, but the husband called her. The next day, Boris volunteered to chop wood. The parents noticed that since yesterday, he had been behaving differently and couldn't get enough of it. They didn't immediately realize that the chain had been cut. Boris walked into the house unhindered and demanded the keys to his car. The father began to threaten him with the stun gun, but that didn't stop Boris. That's how he got free. However, the parents followed him outside. Valentin held a shotgun. Boris didn't believe his father would really shoot, but his mother did. Fortunately, the shotgun was loaded with salt, not bullets. So Boris found himself captive again. At home, the parents provided him with medical care. Veronica genuinely didn't want it to come to this, but the son didn't believe her. His mother was used to controlling everything, and it had always been that way. Boris didn't understand what else he had to do to make the parents proud of him. After all, he had become the mayor of an entire city. The son also began accusing his mother of ruining his father's life by not letting him make decisions. Veronica was just a selfish old woman who loved no one but herself. Veronica left the room in distress. Valentin called his son a scoundrel. Each family member had something to think about. All of Boris's aides were already looking for new jobs. Svetlana knew that without her husband she was nothing. Valentin hugged his wife. In the morning, Veronica said that their son was right. She was a monster. The only thing he was wrong about was that she didn't love her husband and son. Valentin believed Boris said all that just to hurt her as much as possible. It was still not the time to set him free. Valentin thought the son didn't deserve breakfast, but when the husband left, Veronica brought Boris a sandwich and saw that he had harmed himself. Veronica screamed in horror and fainted, not knowing it was all just an act. Fearing his mother had a heart attack, Boris loudly called for his father. Valentin didn't hear him, but the dog did. Father and son urgently took Veronica to the hospital. They prayed it wasn't too late. At that moment Boris deeply regretted not allocating money for road construction. A tire blew out, and Boris quickly had to change it. Then father and son could only wait in the hospital. Later, a doctor came out and said they had done everything possible, but the hospital had neither the medicines nor the equipment. Boris was about to call for a helicopter to transport his mother to Moscow, but the doctor said the patient was not transportable. Hearing this, Valentin silently walked down the hospital corridor. Boris won the election and became mayor for a second term. Michael brought construction contractors into the mayor's office, who offered him a bribe and asked to sign some documents. But Boris did not respond, staring into space. At his feet sat the parent's dog. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.